Welcome everyone to McNally Robinson. My name is Irene and I am the president of the Heritage Festival of Saskatoon and your host for this evening's speaker series at McNally. This is our 38th annual festival, and this year the theme is the streets of Saskatoon. We're celebrating not just the physical roads themselves, but the people and events that pass through these streets as well. And we are very thrilled and very honored to have Lyndon Linklater and Charlie Clark here with us this evening. Thank you very much. We wish to acknowledge the land on which Saskatoon is situated. We recognize the land here as Treaty 6 territory, the homeland of the Métis, land of the Plains Cree, Woods Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Dene peoples. In the spirit of reconciliation, we encourage everyone to consider what actions you can take to move forward in that spirit of fellowship. We also want to thank our sponsors because without them, this festival would not be possible. The Government of Canada, Building Communities Through Heritage and Arts, City of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan Lotteries, and our in-kind partners at the Western Development Museum, ProPrint, and 33rd Street Business Improvement District. Plus a special thank you to our media partners, Saskatoon Media Group, 98 Cool, CJWW, The Bull, and CFCR Community Radio. And of course, we also want to thank McNally Robinson for having us here tonight. And now, thank you to both of our speakers, and I'd like to take just a couple minutes to introduce them. Our first speaker, Lyndon, is a traditional knowledge keeper and storyteller with an educational background in Indian social work, Indian studies, and some law. He is a citizen of the Thunderchild First Nation, Plains Cree, in Treaty 6 territory, and has roots in Couchiching First Nation, Fort Frances, Ontario, in Treaty 3. He is the longest serving member of the Office of the Treaty Commissioner's Speakers Bureau since he was appointed in 2000. Over the years, he has spoken to tens of thousands of people, delivering awareness and enlightenment on Treaty and First Nation worldview. Presently, Lyndon shares work with the Remai Modern Art Museum in Saskatoon as their Indigenous Relations Advisor, providing advice to their board and staff and delivering cultural programming. Charlie Clark grew up mostly in British Columbia, and he moved to our city in 2002 and served as mayor of Saskatoon from 2016 to 2024. And for 10 years before that, he was a city councillor. During this time, Charlie worked with First Nation and Métis governments and organizations to strengthen relationships and build partnerships, working together on a wide variety of initiatives, including how to return to the original spirit and intent of the treaty relationship, to work towards Wetaskiwin, living peacefully together on this land through supporting each other to build Mi'ope-Matsewin, good livelihoods. He believes these core treaty principles can be the basis for creating a better society and future for everyone. Today, his work with the Office of the Treaty Commissioner explores how to strengthen relationships between First Nations and municipal partners across Saskatchewan. So please help me welcome Lyndon and Charlie. And before we begin though, I would like to present to Lyndon as a sign of our respect and our great honor that you attend tonight and grace us with your knowledge and your presence.
Red. Right, just red. Supposed to be green?
It's supposed to be green. Maybe
Red, I don't know.
Hold on.
Blame Irene. Irene did it. Anyways, I'm honored to be here. Thank you for attending. I want to acknowledge the tobacco that's been offered to me. It's a very long tradition in our culture. whenever you invite someone to come and share stories or share knowledge, it's a tradition to offer them a tobacco. Tobacco is a universal tradition with all Indigenous peoples. And the stories vary from location to location. But I had heard a story when I was a little boy in Ontario. As introduced in my bio, on my paternal side, we come from Treaty 3, and that is now what is called Northwestern Ontario. And the name of our First Nation, there's a Couchiching, which is in the language, the Ojibwe language, and it translates to, it's describing a place where the river meets the lake. That's a Couchiching in the language. So that's where we come from on my paternal side. And when I was about 10 years old, I was with my late father. We went to a ceremony, and there is this man holding tobacco, and he had it up in the air, and he was talking in the language to the people, and I don't know what he said. You know, I was 10 years old about, and he was talking Ojibwe language. I don't know what he said. And later that day when we were driving home, I asked my dad, what did that grandfather say when he's holding up the tobacco? So my dad was, closed his eyes and he thought, and he said, when tobacco, no, what he said was, when this part of the world was first made, one of the very first plants ever created was tobacco. So that's what he said. So, you ask Siri, I don't know, sometimes Siri listens to me. Hey Siri. Try it again here. Hey Siri. How old is planet Earth?
The answer I found is 4.5 billion years.
So according to Siri,
How come your Siri is so British?
I wanted her British. Get a choice, if it's true, if the story's true, like what if when this part of the world was first made 4.5 billion years ago? What if the story's true and that tobacco was one of the first plants ever created? It's like, whoa. So in our cultures, yeah, tobacco is a very special plant. Tobacco has a lot of meanings and teachings. So I thank you for the tobacco. Like I don't smoke, but it's the tobacco. That's the important plant. Yeah. But anyways, I wanted to acknowledge that, and I also wanted to acknowledge before we, start our conversation and our presentation and our visit here, I wanted to acknowledge the Office of the Treaty Commissioner. The OTC has been around since 1989. And, the reason why it was created ultimately was to address this long-standing issue that had to do with land. So, we heard the land acknowledgement. We're on Treaty 6 territory. That's what it's called, Treaty 6. And under that treaty, there was an agreement that was made. And as part of that agreement, the First Nation people, we get so much land that we get to live on, that we get to call home. And so for every First Nation that was signatory to Treaty 6, they get some land, and what it amounts to basically is for every family, you get 1 square mile of land for every family. So let's pretend like we're a First Nation here, the McNally Robinson First Nation. And how many families are there? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. What? There's like 22 of us here. So according to the treaty, the McNally Robinson First Nation should be 22 square miles. Right? Because that's what the treaty says. So we made the X, we signed. So this is what happened in all of Treaty 6 territory. There's in Saskatchewan, there's 74 First Nations in Saskatchewan, but Treaty 6 also extends into Alberta, what is now called Alberta. And there's more First Nations in Alberta as well. But anyways, each First Nation is larger. Some are larger than others. There's some smaller First Nations and larger ones. And that simply has to do with how many signatories there were. That's the reason. So the more signatories, the larger the First Nation, right? So this is what happened in Canada. Treaty 6 was made, and the government started to carry out the terms of the treaty. So what ultimately ended up happening, though, over 100 years go by, and what starts to happen is the First Nation people, now some of us are lawyers. Now, some of us are doctors. You know, we have an education. Some of us are judges. Like we're well versed. We can read books. We can write and read and all that. So what we do is we go back to the original treaty and we read that provision that they signed and agreed upon. We go look at the original signatory list. We count how many X's. Then we go measure our First Nation. And we say, hey, we had 22 signatories, but our McNally Robinson First Nation is only 16 square miles. Like we're short. It should be 22 square miles, you see? So this is what happened. Virtually every First Nation signatory to the treaty never got the land they should have received under the terms of the treaty. So what we did when we realized that, we went to Canada and said, hey, Canada, what happened? And what we found out, sadly, corrupt government officials illegally sold land that belonged to us, or in some cases, the federal government simply never lived up to their promise. So in some cases, there could very well have been 200 signatories. So that's 200 square miles. See, but when they go measure their reserve, it's only 150 square miles. So they're missing 50 square miles of land. So anyways, this is what happened. And so what we did is we wrote a letter and we filed a court application, and we told Canada, we're taking you to court because we're supposed to get under the treaty. We're supposed to get X amount of land, but we never got it. So Canada was forced to address that. And Canada could not defend itself because they're in the wrong. You do the math, it's like it's black and white. We're supposed to get X amount, we never got it. What happened? And we can prove it that it was the government's fault. So Canada had to live up to their promise. The problem, though, there's no more land. Like it's all owned. Someone owns it. Private individuals own it. Cities own it. The rural municipalities own it. The provincial governments, the federal government. Like there's no more land. How? So this is the issue Canada had. So what they did to fix the problem was they created this organization called the Office of the Treaty Commissioner. So this is why OTC was born. So the first commissioner happened to be a mayor as well. And his name was Cliff Wright. He was the first first treaty commissioner under the OTC. You guys remember Cliff Wright? Right. So Cliff had an ability to bring parties together, and he had an ability to mediate and to arrive at agreements with parties. And so this is what he did. It took him 3 years. He succeeded. we came up with what's called the Treaty Land Entitlement Framework Agreement. And so basically how it worked, the government gave money to the First Nations with strings attached. So there's the agreements like this thick, it's like a Bible, right? It's like a legal document, but these strings attached. And basically what the First Nations have to do, they have to buy the land that they should have gotten in the first place with these strings attached. Like, so in other words, the First Nations, we can't go to Las Vegas. No, like we want to go looking for shopping for land over there. No, we can't do that under the agreement, and we have to follow that agreement. It's like legal. So there's these strings attached. So basically, that's the story of the OTC. And that's why they were created back in 1989. So they're over 30 something years old now. But over the years, you know, they've evolved, and the very first land that was purchased under that agreement is in our city here. If you're familiar with the Sutherland part of Saskatoon, on Packham Avenue, it's called. There's what is now called an urban reserve there. And that's owned by Muskeg Lake. And the chief at the time was Harry LaFond. And we were talking about Harry here. It's Harry Potter, you know. But anyways, that's the story of the OTC. And, you know, they've evolved and they have all these different departments. There's this one department, it's called the Speakers Bureau. And how it works, you call the office and you say, hey, we're having a community event. And we would like to teach more about the treaties, and we'd like to teach more about the history. And is there anyone you could dispatch to us? So they, you know, they send out a call. So me and Harry got this call and so we put these yellow lights on our vehicles, and we were dispatched here. And so that's how we're here tonight. Yeah, so I want to acknowledge them, the Office of the Treaty Commissioner. So anyways, we have a little visit, and both Charlie and I have this problem, is like we like to talk. But anyways, we want to have a conversation, and we want to invite all of you at any point in time to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions. In fact, I'm told whoever asks the most questions tonight will receive a check for $500 from Scott Moe. Any questions? Any questions? Anyways, I just want to start off that. Yeah, forgive me, I got these terrible jokes I try and tell. But anyways, I understand, you know, you're having this festival here, and it's 38 years old. Wow, that's pretty cool. Anyways, I'm gonna pass it over to my colleague here, the former mayor. I heard him say, I can't help but tell this story here. We were at an event together at Wanuskewin. It's the first time I saw him since he, you know, stepped down as the mayor, and however long that went by. And I was so happy to see him. We're at this event at Wanuskewin, and we're all sitting in a big circle, and everybody took turns to introduce themselves, you know, and when in big circle, and I was like about 50 people in that circle. When it came to him, he says, yes, my name's Charlie Clark, and I'm a recovering politician.
That's true. And that's kind of, it's kind of neat in a way to be following a similar path to someone like Cliff Wright, you know, in terms of the connection to the Office of the Treaty Commissioner. I'm not the Treaty Commissioner, but that sort of vision that he created, or he, along with leadership here, First Nations leadership, and the provincial and federal governments, has been very, very important for our province. And so being that during the time I was mayor, there was so much talk about reconciliation and about, you know, how do we build a different future than what the past 150 years have looked like. You know, I just found myself more and more drawn to this sort of question of, and Lyndon said it earlier that, you know, the promise of the treaty is to live together and have a better life for everyone. And I really see that is something that can have a real impact. So I do want to also thank the Heritage Festival for organizing this event and for all of the work that you do to make sure that the stories that got us to where we are today continue to be told. You know, there's that simple saying that you know, in order to know where you're going, you need to know where you came from. And in today's world where people are stuck on TikTok and, you know, and very, very, you know, immediate information and all those things, and there is less attention to to reading and to understanding history, you know, that is at the harm of I think our society, and that's how you keep making the same kind of mistakes over and over again, not learning from the past. And I'm really happy that we were invited through the Speakers Bureau of OTC to come and be able to talk a little bit about things like treaties and the role that treaties play in our history. Does anybody know the significance of this year when it comes to treaties? Lyndon, yes, 150 years ago was this. The treaty was made.
No, there's a word for the 150 years. Special.
Oh, right, like silver, gold, like that kind of thing.
Like bicentennial, centennial. There's one for.
You could ask Siri. You're fish might. Yeah. So whatever that is, the rose, silver, centennial. So, and do people know where Treaty 6 was first signed? Because it was signed a few times.
The word is
Sesquicentennial. Right.
There we go. I stumbled. You got it. You got it.
That's right. Does anybody know where the signing was?
Guessing for
No, that's yes. Fort Welsh is in the Treaty 4 territory, so Fort Carleton, which is just barely an hour north of here. If you turn at Duck Lake, take a left and go through Beatties and Oklamasas, and you end up, it's a beautiful area. And on August 23rd this year, there's gonna actually from the 21st till the 23rd, there's gonna be a big commemoration, and they're trying to get the king to come, King Charles, to be part of that. So the more I've learned about the treaties and the treaty relationship, the more I've found it to be a really incredibly interesting and important agreement. And I was meeting with Lyndon at the Tim Hortons last week as we were talking about up on Idlewild and 38th to talk about what we were going to talk about, and I kept saying the treaty signing, and he said, the treaty was not signed, it was made. It was a, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you think about it as something that was created and is made and is an ongoing relationship, it's different than something that was signed and done and buttoned up. Is that the right way to interpret the two different things?
Well, you know, it's to me, it's a fascinating conversation, and I love, you know, having it, especially with, you know, the general public. And in my role as a Speakers Bureau member, this is something I always try to get my audiences to understand. And what it ultimately has to do with is culture. You see, when the treaty was signed and when the treaty was made, you got to understand there's two things going on there at the same time. In our culture, we never had a written language. So here we are sitting in the library full of books, you know, but in our culture, books did not exist. And there is no alphabet, there's no letters, there's no handwritten there's a movie. And in this movie, it's about when the missionaries first came to convert us, you know. And in this movie, there's a scene in this movie where this man is writing in his journal. He's just writing, sitting there writing. And then this First Nation man is watching him. This First Nation just amazed, like, what are you doing? He says to this man writing. And the man says, I'm writing a letter. Well, what are you doing? What is that? Because he never saw that before. So the man says to him, where's your mother? And he says, my mother died. Like when? 5 winters ago. How did she die? From what? Smallpox. So the man writes this on a letter, folds up the piece of paper, gives him the letter, says, go give this piece of paper to that man by the canoes by the lake. So the guy walks away, the letter in his hand, walks to the lake by the canoes, gives the letter to the man there. The man looks at, reads it, says, your mom died 5 winters ago from smallpox. How did you do that? Like, he was amazed. Because you see, we never had that. We never had a written language, see? So when it came time, the Crown, the government wanted us to make our X on this piece of paper. And when we negotiated the treaty, like, we asked for all these things. We asked for all these things. And when it came time to sign the treaty, we didn't know what we were signing. Like, how do we know what we talked about and what we shook hands about and agreed about is on that paper? Like, how do we know? And we were told, trust us. You see? So what we did in our culture to make the treaty, because we didn't just sign a treaty, we made a treaty, see? So what we did, we sit in a circle and we have a ceremony. It's kind of not a good example to use nowadays, but I'll use it, the marriage ceremony. Okay, so when 2 people get married, what do? They stand in front of this person who wears a white collar. And they make these sacred vows to one another. They make these promises to one another in front of this individual. And who that individual represents is God. See, so they make these sacred vows to one another. I will love you and honor you and cherish you in sickness and in health, and good times and in bad, for better, for worse, you know, till death do us part. You know, they make the promises to one another. And that's the significance of getting married, you see? So that's what we did. But it's not called a marriage ceremony, it's called a pipe ceremony. So in our culture, maybe you've heard it as a peace pipe. You've heard that term, peace pipe. Well, in our culture, the pipe is very, very sacred. Because with that pipe, in our beliefs, we can communicate with God. I kind of make a joke about it, but that pipe is like a cell phone to God. Direct line to no long distance charges. But when you smoke the pipe, that's what we're doing, is we can talk to God. See, so this is what we did. We made the treaty, we made the promises to one another, what the treaty is all about. And in our culture, that the wooden stem, when you touch the wooden stem of a pipe, you must speak ultimate truth. You cannot lie to God. It's impossible. One day, we are going to be standing in front of the Maker. One day, the Maker is going to ask us a question. You think we can lie? Can we lie? No way. You cannot lie. No. So you see, that's what we did. We made these promises to one another. This is what the treaty's all about. So when the treaty commissioner took that pipe, when he touched the stem, it was as if he was saying, I do. You get it? Yeah. To help you get it even more, I always crack this joke. Are you going to say to your honey, hey, honey, you want to sign love or you want to make love? So anyways, when I hear that, people, they're so, we signed the treaty, when the treaty was signed, you know, Treaty 6 was signed and it was more than signed, it was made. You see, that's my point. So that's what I heard Charlie, we were having our coffee meeting at Timmy's there and he kept telling me about the signing of Treaty 6, you know, and I told him it wasn't only signed, it was made. So that started another conversation. We started talking about that, you see. But anyway, like in talking about the treaty, this is something like this, the Office of the Treaty Commissioner is all about, is that treaty education. You know, in our province, for a while there, it's been a while, but for a while, and we got to thank of all people, Brad Wall, our premier, once upon a time, Brad Wall. Saskatchewan was the only province in Canada that made teaching treaties in the classroom compulsory. At one time, I think maybe Manitoba has started now, I think. But at one point, it was only Saskatchewan. So what started happening in our province, our children, like right from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12, they're learning about treaties in the classroom because it's compulsory. So every teacher in Canada had to start, you know, getting books. And there's a beautiful book there about treaties that the OTC helps. And it provides a great deal of understanding, you know, and awareness. It's come to the point now where our children know more about the treaties than we do. We'll be sitting at the dinner table and the little one will say, hey, mom and dad, hey, grandpa, grandma, did you know we're all treaty people? Where'd you hear that? How do you know that? Where'd you hear that? And they'll be educating us. See, and that's what's happened. So more and more Canadians are becoming educated about these things called treaties. And the thing about the treaty, yeah, what the treaty is about, and you mentioned it, Bamatsuin, like a livelihood, to be able to maintain a livelihood, you see, and it's called Neil Bamatsuin, like Duskiwin, like to work together, get along with one another. See, that's what the treaty's about. That's what it's all about. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. See, and this is what we're living in now. We're living in this new time. It's called reconciliation. It's called truth and reconciliation. And it's a good thing. It's a really good thing. But the truth, oh, sometimes the truth is hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about the truth, but we have to. We got to talk about the truth. So, you know, not to disrespect this place where we are in right now, but it's full of books. When I went to school, okay, I'm starting to get old. I'm young, but I'm getting old up there. It would have been 1970. That's when I was in grade 1, kindergarten, grade 1, 1970. Okay. The books I read about the history of Canada and about my ancestors, incorrect. What they were teaching in the schools, you see, and what they taught in these books that were written, you know, it would say in there, the Indians were uncivilized. The Indians were heathen. You know, the Indians were savage. They taught this in the schools, you see? So you get taught this over and over again. You start to develop a perception. You start to develop an understanding. And because you don't know what you don't know, right? How are you supposed to know what you don't know? And so this is what they teach. So what this did is it created a misunderstanding that's embedded in the education system. And this went on for years and years and years. I remember learning how to read and write in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, you know, and my dad was a teacher. So I would go home and I would say, Dad, what does primitive mean? Because I'm just a little kindergarten. So my dad, how he would explain primitive, it's like a caveman or cave people, you know, they're primitive. So right away, I got this idea about my ancestors. They were primitive. Because that's what the books say. Then I'm learning more. I go home, Dad, what does uncivilized mean? So my dad is a teacher. He'd explain what uncivilized means. So you see, what starts to happen over time is that I start to develop this understanding and this picture in my mind of this certain group of people. And it's not a very, nice picture. I'll just say it that way, see? And this is how we were taught, all of us, because of these books that were taught in the schools. This is what the teachers taught, you see? But here we are now today. It's called Truth and Reconciliation. So now we're reading these kinds of books. That's a good book there. That book that Charlie has there. Yeah, there's stories in there. Oh, it's amazing. So what I learned now today, like when I went to university, whoever wrote those books is full of BS. They didn't know what they're talking about. They're so misinformed, and they were very culturally biased. Yeah, they didn't know what they were writing. But that's the truth. Because in reality, the First Nation people were very intelligent. They were very, very intelligent. How they survived off the land for thousands and thousands of years. And they had their own kind of mathematics. They had their own psychology. They had their own sociology. They had their own medicine people. They had their own pharmacists. Like they had all these things that I'm learning about, and so anyways, like, here we are, we're sitting in a library full of books. Books are very powerful, you see, and anyways, I don't know what started me on that little topic there.
So I think I think it was the treaty being made, and we went a little distance from there, but and I think, given part of my own experience, I guess, in coming to terms with this sort of idea that the treaty being made, not signed, it's something that affects all of us today, and that along with the making of the treaty was the introduction of the Indian Act, which really just brought in a whole bunch of policies one after another that were absolutely in the opposite spirit of the treaty, of building a relationship and supporting each other for mio pimatsu, and to support each other to live a good life. Everything from residential schools to controlling people being able to make a livelihood, to farm, and all of the different things that we've learned about, that have been incredibly harmful to First Nations people. Now the treaties are still a living agreement, a living covenant to each other, and so now is our chance to learn how to live them out, and that's a lot of the work that I'm doing with the people of the Office of the Treaty Commissioner. And something Lyndon talked about, how there wasn't a written language at that time. What else didn't exist in 1876 when Treaty 6 was signed? And this kind of brings us back to the heritage theme. Saskatoon. One of the first people moved into Saskatoon was in the early 1880s, right? The bar colonists and all those people. Most of the communities that we have in our province were not even in the consciousness of the people who signed treaty. And you can only imagine for the First Nations people, they did not anticipate, how are you going to live together between these towns and villages and cities and the First Nations. And so when the treaty was signed, they were talking about and discussing the circumstances, and it was meant to be a living document, a living relationship that would continue to be revisited. But so it's very interesting now when you plunk a city of 300,000 people down into this territory of Treaty 6, what does it mean for these cities to be part of treaty? and that's what I'm doing now, traveling around the province and looking at where is there good collaboration and good partnership happening, and where is there an openness and a willingness and an open-heartedness on the side of people who are in communities that want to see how to build a better livelihood, and where can there be actually great opportunities, like up in the Battlefords, they're now working together to have Red Pheasant First Nation has purchased land that will be the site for their new hockey rink that will be jointly owned, jointly managed, and to create a great hockey facility and skating facility for everyone, all the kids growing up, whether they're whatever background they are, that creates opportunity. And they're partnering together to do that. Among a lot of other things they're partnering on up in that area. Up in La Ronge, they're jointly managing their waste services, their fire department, their and their water treatment plant between the Lac La Ronge Indian Band and the town of La Ronge, and they're all seeing the benefit of doing that, of working together, because they're getting better equipment. It's lower cost for each of them, but it took actually reaching across and building a relationship and being willing to trust each other, and that's only been happening in these areas in the last 10 years. And Lyndon talked earlier about Harry Lafond, and the signing of which was actually Harry Lafond and Cliff Wright going back in 1988 signed the very first urban reserve agreement in all of Canada, right here in Saskatoon, out in Sutherland. And that was a leap of faith by everybody involved. And we actually had a pipe ceremony to recognize the 30th anniversary of that signing, and we went out to the Packham Avenue area, and we sat together, the leadership of the municipality or of the city and from Muskeg Lake and from the community. And I remember very well, we were all sitting together, and we were recognizing the work that had happened. And Harry talked about, at that time, because he was still with us, and he still is with us, but he was there in the pipe ceremony. It was a really amazing thing. It was actually just after Cliff Wright had passed, so unfortunately Cliff wasn't able to be there. But Harry said back then, it was not just the mayor and the chief, but it was the staff. Teresa Dust was the lawyer at the time. She retired from the city. There was different staff people that could have found all kinds of reasons to say, no, we shouldn't be the first to do this, and we can't trust each other, and this is going to go badly, and our residents aren't going to trust having a First Nation owning land in the middle of the community, and having a municipal services agreement instead of a property tax agreement, even though they're the same thing. And he said, but rather than find reasons not to do it, those leaders at the time chose to see strength in one another. And I'll never forget that way of thinking about a relationship, because we talk in this country about multiculturalism, and we talk about being tolerant, and we talk about accepting each other and that type of thing. But when Harry said they chose to see strength in one another, that to me embodies and this book I brought, and I was going to go and double check that there's copies here right now of Nellie Robinson, but if you want to read one book to learn about what the spirit and intent of the treaties was from the point of view of elders from across the province, Dene elders, Saulteaux elders, Cree elders, like north, south, east, west. This is an amazing book, and you don't even have to try and read. It takes quite a bit, even though it's short, to read it, because it's especially for non-Indigenous people, I think you have to really wrap your head around, but you can just read 1 or 2 pages and you learn a huge amount. But the vision behind the treaty was that we see strength in one another, and unfortunately, as we know, which is the opposite of what all of the Indian Act policies did, which was to assimilate and to train everybody who is non-Indigenous to think of Indigenous people as as Lyndon said, uncivilized or savage or all these things in order to justify taking the land and the assimilation policies. We still have a chance to turn that around. And now that kids are learning about the treaties, and there's more and more people who are committing to a different relationship. So to me, this is the work we have, but that it can be a very positive outcome for everyone. Do you think we should try and create some room for questions?
Yeah, try. If there's any questions.
$500.
Well, you're in the lead.
Right, yeah.
Still 15 minutes left. So I might need you.
Get on that. Carry on.
Part of my ignorance. So when the treaty was put together, where did it fail? Did it fail that day, or did it start crumbling over a few days, and then it just kind of opened up the doors for the government? Well, hey, we have control. They don't know any different. Where did it start breaking down? Where did it not join the rest of Canada?
So in my opinion, I hate to use I don't even want to bring up his name, but Donald Trump, that it was raped. The whole treaty idea was like raped. Canada needed something on paper to say they own the land or they have title to the land. See, and this is the history. This is all part of how it works under a country that follows the rule of law. So it's called the Royal Proclamation 1763. The King of England made a law. It's called the Royal Proclamation. And what it says in there, it talks about the lands, of British North America, like these lands. Yeah, and from that day forward, if you want title to any piece of land in British North America, you have to go to the Crown to get it. You see, so from that day forward, if people, homesteaders, pioneers, they want to have a farm, well, if they want to have title to that land, they got to go to the Crown to get title. The problem the Crown had, they never had title either. They had to get title. So under the provisions of the Royal Proclamation, it says in there that the Crown can get title by way of treaty making. So this is why treaties are so important. So this is how Canada got title to the land here, by way of these treaties, you see? But here's where it's kind of like it's kind of like a raped deal now. And so what happens is that if you look at the treaties, it's basically a template. Treaty 1, Treaty 2, Treaty 3, template, and it goes from one area to the next piece of, as they move west. And so you get into what are called the numbered treaties, treaties 1 to 11, and so it's just like, okay, we got to do this, sign your X here, and let's get on with it. Like that's the government's attitude. So you see, it was flawed from day one, right from the get-go. I say, now this is my opinion, when I look at the treaty commissioner, his name was Governor Morris. He was the treaty commissioner of Treaty 6. He was a good man. He was a fair man, and history can prove it. What was happening when Treaty 6 was being negotiated? Our people were dying of smallpox and influenza at alarming rates, like COVID epidemic rates. Yeah, and so what our leaders told Treaty Commissioner, we know you have medicine for these illnesses. Our medicines aren't working. We know you have medicine. So if we're going to make a treaty with you, we want access to your medicines. Otherwise, we're not going to make a treaty. So Treaty Commissioner Morris went to the government and said they want access to the medicines. They want basically, we know it today as Medicare. That's what we were asking for. And the government told, no, don't give it to them. But you know what Treaty Commissioner did? he went ahead and did it. So when you look at the history of all treaties that were made and negotiated and concluded with the Crown, only Treaty 6 contains an express provision, and it's known as the Medicine Chest Clause. See, Treaty Commissioner put that in there, that Medicine Chest Clause. So what does it mean, the Medicine Chest Clause? Well, it's Medicare, before Medicare even existed. So if we get sick, the First Nation people, we go to called the Indian Agent's house. We have access to that medicine chest. See, so that's just an example of what he did, is the treaty commissioner. So what it comes down to is like goodwill. That's what the treaty's all about. So let's be good to one another. Let's take care of one another. Like that's what we asked for, and, you know, as part of that treaty pipe ceremony. And that's what the treaty commissioner agreed and promised. I know there's like 10 minutes left here. I want to tell you a cool story, but it's I'll speed it up real fast. It's sadly, you know, the Colton Bushy, what happened in our province, it divided our province. And half of our province said he was right. And, you know, they had it coming. That kid had it coming. You know, you can't go into someone else's land like that and take stuff away. And, you know, he's defending his own property, and, you know, he's in the right. That's what one side said. And then the other side said, no, you can't kill somebody. You can't do that. This is Canada. You like, anyways, we were fighting, you know, and our province was divided. And what came out of this? Farmers got together. White farmers got together, and they created this organization called the Treaty Land Sharing Network. And how it works, you phone this 1-800 number, and it gets you to this operator. And like it's for Indigenous people to access a treaty land sharing network. And so I will phone this number, this 1-800 number, and they'll ask me, what's your name? Where do you come from? I come from Thunderchild. My name's Lyndon Linklater. I'm a First Nation person. I come from Thunderchild. Yeah, I need some medicines for my ceremonies. I need some sweetgrass. I need some sage for my ceremonies. Okay, where do you live, Lyndon? Oh, I live by Martinsville. Okay, and they look on all their members who belong to the Treaty Land Sharing Network, and they're all like farmers. Oh yeah, we got a couple that live around Martinsville area. Here's their number, contact them. So see what they're doing? Sharing the land. That's what they're doing. They learned about the treaties. They took it upon themselves to organize and create this beautiful organization called the Treaty Land Sharing Network. Like, that's remarkable. That's so cool that they did that. So for example, like we go hunting, you know, we got to go hunting for deer or moose. We phone that number. They'll let us come to their land and hunt. Got to make arrangements, so you just can't show up, you know, like, but you'll phone the number and you'll talk to whoever, and they'll make arrangements and see what they're doing. They're sharing the land. That's what the treaty is about. We're supposed to share the land, you see? And they organized that, these white farmers, and it's still in existence to this day. Like, that's such a remarkable, beautiful story. And so it's up to us as Canadians to enforce the treaties. It's up to us. The government won't do it for us. You can't depend on those guys. However, if elected, I promise that. Anyways, I want to share that story.
I know there's a question, but if you want to learn more about what was going on at that time, and look up Chief Mistawasis's comments at the signing of Treaty 6, and he gives a speech that really describes the circumstances that were going on and the dilemma that the nations faced in terms of whether, and then Chief Atakakup as well, and Chief Poundmaker, they all have somewhat different sort of views, but the context of the duress that they were under, right? But at the same time, what they believed they were doing by signing, the sort of hope that they had that this could be a good thing. I agree with with Lyndon that it was rigged. Ultimately, it was a transactional tool by the government to get to be able to move the First Nations off the land so they could have people settle. Interestingly enough, one of the biggest drivers of that was the U.S. potentially trying to take over. So here we are again. Anyways, I know you have a question.
Actually, I don't have a question because it was kind of on what you were talking about treaties, because I read that book.
Okay.
It took some time, but what I understand out of it is what you were saying. But it was two completely different ways of looking at the
Yes.
world.
Yes.
Like
And land.
the native folk and the white, like this, you talk about the crown. No concept, absolutely no concept of what the native folk are trying to negotiate. So they weren't negotiating the same thing. And that's where it fell apart.
One of the things that just hit me really in the face when I read this book is if you don't believe you can own land,
Mhm.
that the land is your mother, that it says in this book that we never sold or ceded or surrendered the land because it was never ours to give. But so fundamental to the concept of settlement was land ownership, right? The next thing the government wanted to do was to parcel it up, get the railway through, and then every second lot along the railway would be sold, and then they'd sell to the. So those two worldviews were just, and the First Nations at the time had no idea that that's what would happen. And that's one of the most difficult things to figure out. How do we actually live together now with these two very different ideas about land? And the Treaty Land Sharing Network is a great example of
Sharing thing that's a step forward. There's some people at least that are working on getting that your head wrapped around it. You don't own it. That's such a different way of looking at the world.
Yes. We got like 4 minutes left before the lightning bolt strikes the meeting. But like contrary to those books that I learned when I was a child, learning about my ancestors, what I now know today is like I said, those books, they didn't know what they were writing, they didn't understand, and they were incorrect. But I want to acknowledge my relatives that live to the south of us, called Whitecap Dakota First Nation. Like the Dakota, I just looked on my phone here. It's called Dakota Dunes Golf Course. It opened in the year 2004. That's when it opened. The following year, it won an award by Golf Digest magazine as one of the best courses in North America. For a golf course to win that prestigious award is unbelievable in all of North America. And Golf Digest, like that's the Bible of golfers, what they read. And any golf course that wins that recognition is like in all of North America. It's just unbelievable. And Whitecap won it in 2005. They won the Dakota Dunes Golf Course, one of the best new courses in North America by Golf Digest. Chief Darcy Bear, he was lucky that Saskatoon had a plebiscite and voted against having a casino in their boundary. Darcy Bear's eyes went cha-ching. Let's talk. And so now they got a casino there. Now then they built the hotel. Now they're building a spa. Oh man, it's going to be hard to check in at that hotel once that spa starts up and running. But they're a very successful First Nation.
Because things that may have made Saskatoon better that are as a result of relationship with First Nations. Since we signed that since our ancestors signed that first agreement for an urban reserve in 1988, we now have 11. And 7 while I was mayor, which I'm pretty proud of. And urban reserves. And each one of those is now investing in our economy, is creating jobs for hundreds, if not thousands of people that are First Nations, Métis, non-Indigenous, newcomer. Like it's benefiting everybody, and they're making huge investments. And one of my favorite places to go in Saskatoon if I want to have my spirits lifted is the basketball court down at River Landing, the most beautiful basketball court in North America. I'd like to declare, at least I did. That was created as a result of a vision of one Michael Linklater, Chooch, Lyndon's brother, nephew, and he worked together with Michael Donauer and the guy from Escape Escorts, whose name I'm forgetting right now. Anyway, these two non-Indigenous guys, and they said we need to have better outdoor basketball courts for kids to play. And they had this vision, and they said it's got to be in a special place. And they worked and they worked and they built relationships and they worked with the city to get a site. And then they made a relationship with the Jumpstart program out of Canadian Tire to get it fully funded. And that has become this incredible magnet for kids. Like if you want to go and see the best, of the city, coming together, and that wouldn't have happened if Michael hadn't had the vision and wanted to give back to the community, because he grew up playing on rough, basketball hoops without any hoops, and but became a Husky athlete and a Canadian champion with the Huskies. We've had so many contributions from that relationship, but I think too often we pay attention to more of the negative challenges and the people who are struggling and the homelessness and some of those things, and are not recognizing the benefit that comes from working together. And before we wrap up, I just want to give a shout out to my former mayor's office family who are here, Jay and Shelley and Anna right here. They came along on the ride with me the whole time and were there for signing of urban reserve agreements and for the planning around the basketball court and coming up with gifts to give away to nations that came and all those things. And so whenever I, talk about things that we accomplished, there's always all these people that are a big part of it and never get the same recognition. And so just wanted to mention those three. Okay.
Well, me too. I want to acknowledge the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute. These two ladies here, they work there. They're doing so much good as well, like learning about the history of our province with Indigenous history and treaties and reconciliation, and it's happening right across our country. And of course, even your organization here, thank you for asking us to come and do this. Thank you so much. I echo what Charlie said. There's a lot of sad stories and sad realities when we talk about Indigenous people in our city and Indigenous history in our province, in our country. But we can't let that drag us down. There's beautiful stories as well, and there's people out there that can help show you and guide you. So it takes something like this event to ask and bring us out, and it starts a conversation, and you see things and you learn things, and this is how the better way is to go and to. There's so much success out there, and to be inspired, So I thank you for asking us to come here, and I know you got to go. You said to stop for sure by 8 o'clock, but I'll stop there.
And I think it's kind of great that there's a bridge between our two heads here, so it's sort of like a symbol of this work to build bridges.
So how many square miles per signature with the X's on? How close are we to getting to the treaties, or how far away are we?
Well, with all of the land under the treaty land entitlement agreement, it's going to amount to 2% of Saskatchewan's land base.
To finish the job.
Finish the job.
I think there's still, I was talking to Leonard Tippoan from the Saskatchewan Aboriginal Land Technicians, and I think they're still trying to secure 4 million acres or something. Like it's
Sounds like
very
big
hard.
numbers, like,
Yeah,
but
but it's
when you look
not
at
a
the
massive.
total Saskatchewan, the whole province,
Yes.
it's like 2% of the province. That's what
Yes.
we're talking about. So, and this is something that Cliff Wright was very instrumental in getting the public to understand. Because at first the public was very scared, like the Indians are gonna get all the land back. Like that's what they were thinking. But then Cliff Wright explained, well, if you add up all the land, like it's gonna amount to like 2% of of our province. That's what they're gonna get back from the treaties. Yeah, so you know, so that's what these urban reserves, they're very small. They're just little tracts of land. Depends where they buy them. Like if they're right downtown Saskatoon, it's gonna be more expensive as opposed to if it's way out in in the northern part of our province. They can buy bigger chunks of land, but but there's economic reasons and rationale why they want to buy land wherever. It's like playing Monopoly. You want to own Boardwalk and Park Place, or you want Mediterranean and Baltic Avenue, like, so anyways, yeah. So that's yeah. What do you think, Irene?
Hi, are there any other questions or?
Or just a thank you to these guys for everything.
But did you have a question?
I'll have to grab.
I'm curious, when these signatures, was it men, women, children? What was it?
It was the chiefs and their council. Yeah, chiefs and headmen. Yeah.
So the individuals were part of it.
Well, see, in our culture, that we have our leaders, and we recognize them, that they speak on our behalf. We give them that gift, you see. But also so cool about our culture, women are higher than men in our culture. So in other words, what the woman says, the man does. Yeah. In today's contemporary terms, that's called happily married. But see, back in the day, it was the women and the grandmothers especially. They're the ones who had the big say. And so what the grandmothers said, they said, well, we'll tell the chief. The chief will do what we tell. So that's what they did. They told the chief what to do. The chief made the X. So on paper, and according to the dominant culture, it's the men are the leaders. The men are the chiefs. And this is all played right into, it's called colonialism. It's very patriotic, paternalistic. The men are in charge, so it just played right into their ways. And the crown, that's how they thought. So they got these men to sign the treaties. But in our culture, we all knew it's the ladies are the ones calling the shots.
Hasn't changed.
Any other questions? I just want to thank Charlie and Lyndon for coming out this evening. It was a wonderful, great hour. It was a great evening, and we really, really appreciate your energy, your information, and your time, because we know how precious time is. And so thank you very much for coming out and helping us to think of our streets and our community, our cities, our areas in a different way, like just to sort of step back and think, okay, what does my street, what does my community mean to me, but in a larger context, and something that we have to expand our thinking a little bit of. And so thank you very much for helping us along that journey. We really appreciate that. And and I want to thank our audience too. Thank you very much for coming out. We know that for you too, time is very precious, and we really appreciate that you took this hour with us. And I hope you enjoyed your evening as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors, because our sponsors are what enables us to present these events. We had our museum, our Heritage Festival Day at the Western Development Museum this past Sunday. We have this event. And without the sponsors, we wouldn't be able to present them, and we certainly wouldn't be able to present them free of charge, which we are very proud that we're able to do that for the community. So if you allow me, just to acknowledge the Government of Canada through their Building Communities Through Art and Heritage program, the City of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan Lotteries, our in-kind partners at the Western Development Museum, ProPrint, and 33rd Street Business Improvement District, plus a special thank you to our media partners, Saskatoon Media Group, 98 Cool, CJWW The Bull, and CFCR Community Radio. But especially we want to thank McNally Robinson for hosting us and for sponsoring us for this great evening. Thank you very much, and safe travels home, everyone.